Hey guys, welcome to another video from Homesteading Off the Grid. I broke out my crayon today and I wrote a note with my crayon, and this is certainly not the most professional way to write this particular note that I wrote with this crayon, but I used my crayon anyway because this is just part of the journey where I am right now. I'm 44 years old and I have a lot to learn about life still. You know, we're always learning. The day we stop learning is the day that we stop living, or at least the day we stop progressing in our spiritual growth, at least. When we think we know it all, then we probably don't. But one thing I've learned throughout my years is that we can be right or we can be happy, but we can't always be both. I spent the first 40 years of my life trying to be right. Many times I was right, and many times I was proven right. But even after I was proven right, I wasn't always happy. So when I turned 40 a few years ago, I kind of took assessment because, like many of you who have passed that milestone or who soon will, I mean, it's a time of reflection because you realize, wow, according to statistics, I'm halfway through this journey. So one of the things I decided when I was 40 was that if the Creator's gracious enough to give me another 40 years, I'm going to spend more time during that next 40 years focusing on being happy rather than being right. So that's what brought me to the note with the crayon this morning, and I'm going to talk to you about it for a minute. Here about 6 weeks ago, I did a video that was very non-homesteading related, kind of like this one, kind of like a couple others, but we really try to keep it on track here. But I talked to you about a miserable workplace environment which I'm currently involved, and I'm glad I did that because a lot of you gave me a lot of insight. You commented, basically miserable work environment, working 7 days a week for weeks at a time, up to 12 hours a day, no breaks. People were having emotional breakdowns at work because of it, the workload. And I'm 44 years old. I compromised my integrity by calling out sick after working 16 days straight because I needed a break, and I wasn't being given one by my employer. And in 44 years of the several different careers I've had throughout my life, I've never called out from work. So I had to do something that's not part of who I am to kind of get a reprieve from this employment situation. And I went to the doctor, and I'll link that video to the end of this one to give you, so you can go back and see the original backstory. This is a quick version, I promise. I went to the VA and I talked to some doctors there about my situation, and they asked, well, what kind of meds should we, and I said no, because the epiphany we had was that if I have to be medicated to go to this job, I probably should not be going to this job. I mean, again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not making any recommendations about pharmaceuticals or medications because I'm not qualified to do so. But for me, and because I've been down that road after the war, and it didn't work out very good at all for me. It did not go well at all. Had the opposite effect. It made me worse. So for me, I've found I'd rather feel bad some of the time than feel nothing all of the time. And so I just told my doctors no. And so I've gone back every 2 weeks and talked to a great guy, and I'm not just saying that because he might be watching this video. I give credit where credit is due. He's a great guy. He's been very helpful. Retired full bird colonel. Amazing. I mean, I was an E4. I was an enlisted guy, lower enlisted guy. When I was in service, I wouldn't have been allowed to talk to this guy. It's crazy how that works, isn't it? When you're a lower enlisted guy, you can't talk to a full bird colonel until you're out of service, and he's the shrink, and you're the crazy vet, and you're meeting at the VA. But hey, whatever it takes. I have enjoyed getting to know this guy a little bit and letting him get to know me. But we just decided back then 6 weeks ago, and my wife and I talked, that if things persisted, I would just quit. Well, folks, we're at that point, and this is where I brought out the crayon, and I'm going to show you the note I wrote, and it's gotten a little damp because of the dew up here. It's 6:27 a.m. I've been up since 4. I'm the guy that wakes up very early to wake the rooster up that you hear crowing down there. You say, hey, wake up, and crow and wake everybody else up. But I didn't write in my name of the employer because as of now, I'm still not stating who my employer is, but it'll probably be obvious as you listen to this story. And soon, very soon, I will be stating who this employer was once it's past tense, and I will be giving quite a few details. So, dear fill in the blank. Let's see here. On this day, 13 July, no, this is tomorrow because it's my day off. I actually got a day off, tell you how I got those. On this day, 13 July of 2018, I am hereby turning in my 2 weeks notice of resignation. The last day I will be available for work for, and I'm going to fill in the name of the employer here, will be 26 July 2013. And I signed it, all in crayon. So here's what happened, and here's why I finally decided to resign, and it has to do with a 10 to 15 minute part of my day, which is the most important part of my day. It's the most enjoyable part of my day, and I'll go ahead and tell you what part of this day is. It's the first 10 or 15 minutes that my son, who is 7 years old, Daniel, is awake. I have the sweetest little boy in the world, and if he watches this video when he's older, it's going to totally embarrass him. But we have this thing we've done for 7 years, and that is when he wakes up, that first 10 or 15 minutes of that day, we snuggle. We snuggle while he wakes up slowly, and about 15 minutes later he's bouncing off the walls because he's wide awake. But that first 10 to 15 minutes is my time to hold my son and snuggle him until he's bouncing off the walls. And then in the evenings I pry him down off the walls and I try to snuggle with him and hold him until he calms down, and then it's sleep time again. So actually it's twice a day we do this. Well, the other day I didn't get to do this. I'm going to tell you why. It has to do with retaliation and retribution from a spiteful, abusive employer. So about a month ago I was talking to the retired colonel there at the VA, and he did something that he said he had not done in 27 years worth of practice, and that is he wrote me a note that basically stated that he felt, based upon where I was psychologically, my experiences in Iraq, and how I was affected by those experiences, that the current work situation for me of working 7 days a week, 8 to 12 hours a day, for weeks on end without a break was too much for me. And it brought about insomnia, brought about back some more PTSD related nightmares that I had not had in years because I'd not put myself under such stress and pressure for years, but it brought a lot of this stuff back. And he said, let's try this. I know you don't want to do meds. He appreciated the fact that I wasn't a drug seeker. He said, let's try this. So I go to my employer, I take the note. Now, mind you, this doctor cleared me to work 50 hours a week, which is a 125% of a full work week load, okay? I give it to my boss. I'll just call her she. I'm not going to mention names, but it's a woman. She read it. She held the letter over my lap, dropped it in my lap, and she said, this don't mean nothing here. You're trying to get light duty. I ain't giving you light duty. It wasn't, the offense to me was when she said, this don't mean nothing here. And what that, letter detailed some stuff about my service and how I was affected by it. I took that, and maybe I took it wrong, but I took that to mean my service didn't mean nothing here. And you know what? To me it does. And it wasn't as much a personal insult as it was at knowing that if my service didn't mean anything here, I bet you that the other veterans in that place, I bet you their service didn't mean anything either. And there's a lot of veterans working down there. And this is a large organization. They're all over the United States, and I bet you there's people like her in positions of power within this organization around the country to whom military service obviously doesn't mean nothing to them too. Well, I didn't like that. And she told me that she wouldn't honor it, that note. Well, I went above her head to 3 different people above her head, 2 within the organization, 1 on the outside. A couple days later, she was told, yes, this does mean something here, and we do not treat disabled veterans like that here, and you will honor this note. So she took the attitude of, you don't tell me when you work, I tell you when you work. And so instead of scheduling me 5 days a week, up to 10 days or 10 hours a day, and getting me 50 hours, she started retaliating, scheduling me to go in at noon, whereas everybody else starts at 8, and then calling me in off the street, making my deliveries as a courier's assistant, but I'm not saying for who, before I would hit the 8-hour mark each day, which would put me in overtime, which is time and a half. She's basically punishing my paycheck. her attitude is, you will work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, or I will make sure you don't make enough money to pay your bills. So whatever. I mean, my wife and I have always been frugal. You've seen some of our other videos. I showed you the other day when I was planting a pumpkin patch how I use a plastic sled that you sleigh ride with in the winter as my wheelbarrow. I drag it behind my riding lawnmower. Not that I'm tight, but I'm thrifty. I mean, that's part of homesteading, right? Instead of spending $120 on a really nice wheelbarrow at Lowe's, I buy these plastic sleds in February from Kroger, a big grocery store here on the East Coast, because they're 3 for $10. And we break 1, sometimes 2 a year, but 3 will get us through until the next February. We buy 3 more, so I'm paying $3.33. That's just kind of how I am. So the point of that is, I can pay my bills on 30 hours, 35 hours a week, you know. So, okay, lady, you're doing me a favor because I have more time to homestead now. I'm home more. I get to see my son more in the mornings. Instead of making 1 video a day for our channel, we've been making 2. You know, it's kind of like the old Brer Rabbit story. She threw me in a briar patch, and that was not my intentions, but that's how it worked out. So, anyway, it came to a head this past weekend, and that's why I finally wrote this note. I was out on Saturday making deliveries. I was getting ready to hit that 8-hour mark. She calls me in, come in. You know, she has a supervisor do it. And we have wonderful supervisors there, some of them. And I love a lot of my coworkers. So anyway, supervisor calls, says, hey, you need to come in. She's making you come in off the street. You got to go out tomorrow. You got to come in tomorrow on a Sunday and deliver this particular item, which we don't deliver on Sundays or federal holidays. Can't figure out who I work for after I told you that, then you're not paying enough attention to detail. So anyway, I said, come on, man. I said, I got 20 minutes. Let me keep pushing. 20 minutes, I'll be done. He said, okay, keep going, keep going. So I hang up the phone. I'm going. I'm pushing. He calls back like a minute later. He's like, dude, she's screaming at me. You got to come in. I'm sorry. You got to come in, and then come in tomorrow at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. So, okay, whatever. I go back. Get up the next day. I'm always up early, so I didn't have to wake up any earlier, but I had to leave the house earlier. And we go in on Sundays and deliver something else too, a different product. But the one product I had to go in early to deliver is something we typically don't deliver on Sundays. That morning, I had to leave the house earlier, quite a bit earlier, so I didn't see my son. He was asleep. I snuggled with him while he was asleep. I made sure not to wake him up, but it wasn't the same. We didn't get to have our 10 to 15 minutes of snuggle time where, you know, he's 7 years old. He's only going to be 7 years old once, and when he's older, he's not going to, this just isn't going to happen. I know this. You know, we made a video the other day of picking blackberries here on the homestead, and I told the story about how when we had first come to the U.S., me, you know, returning after nearly 6 years away, and my son and my wife for the first time, because she's Filipina and he was born in the Philippines, about how excited he got over seeing blackberries on our farm. Let's switch hands here. But he got so excited because there were blackberries right up here. And he'd never seen blackberries. They don't have them in the Philippines. Now, there's one place there in northern Mindanao called Baguio. It's got a very high elevation. Actually, it's cold there. I guess they might have them there. I know they have strawberries there. But where we were in Mindanao, which is very close to the equator, you can almost see into Indonesia on a clear day. That's how far south it is. There were no blackberries. So he's all excited. And he says, Daddy, we got to buy this farm. We came out to see if we wanted to buy this place. And I'm like, yeah, why do you like it? And he goes, it comes with free food, you know. He wouldn't do that now at 7. He did it at 5. These are the moments that we've got to cherish because they come once and once only, and we don't get them again. So it really, her retaliation, the boss lady, all these things, her pettiness, her spite, it didn't hurt. But missing that 10 to 15 minutes that morning with my son hurt. So I went back, I saw my friend at the VA just yesterday, and I told him I'm done. And my wife and I, we've sat down, we're going to be fine financially. And this is why, and I want to point out, never do anything, I'm not going to do anything that would risk my family's security, lose the house, lose the homestead, not be able to buy food. And we have other revenue sources. The writing thing has been coming back, and oh, by the way, boy, do I have a story to tell. I'm 12,000 words into a new manuscript that pertains to this work situation. It's going to be a good one. You guys are going to want to read it, and I hope to have it out by the end of the year. But you know, I used to temp. I went through a temping agency before I took this full-time job with this courier place, and they've contacted me once a month since I left, and they've said, hey, you know, we like you. If you ever need us again, let us know. Well, if I have to, I'm going to be in touch with him and say, hey, I need 3 or 4 days a week, because that'll be enough. Our needs will be met. But I'll get my time in the morning with my son, and I'll get it again in the evening. And I was never treated there the way I've been treated where I am now. And so the decision's been made, the note's been written, because I won't get this time back with my son. The point of this story is that, as I mentioned in the beginning, we can be right or we can be happy. The choice is ours, and the choice isn't always the same. And folks, I'm making the choice to be happy. I will be sacrificing a little bit of money for my happiness, but I really believe that's a sign of spiritual growth. When you reach the point to where your time and the people who are important to you in your life, time spent with them is more important than the almighty dollar, that's a sign of spiritual growth. At least I'd like to think it is. So it's a risk. I'm taking a risk, and I'm going to just throw myself into the homesteading here, the homesteading stuff, and I'm going to throw myself back into my writing, which is what I'm passionate about. And the writer's block is gone. I've had it for more than a year, but I now have a story to write. It's written in my head because I've lived it for the last nearly 7 months, and now I just have to put it in word. One thing I've found, and I'll end with this, some of you are probably saying finally, is that having your head in the right place is important. Having your heart in the right place is important as well. But when we have our heads and our heart in the right place at the same time, it's hard to go wrong. So that's where I feel I am now. My head and my heart are in the same place, and I believe it's the right place. So I want to thank all of you who have been supportive. There's a lady named Cindy Black. I want to give her a shout out. Hey, Cindy Black. She commented, she put a very powerful comment on the original video about my miserable workplace environment, which I will link to the end of this one. They really gave me the courage to step forward. Cindy shared in the comment section that she was in a similar work situation several years ago, and she knew she was losing her soul. And so she went home one night after work. She wrote out her resignation letter. She went to work the next day. She worked out her full day, and then she resigned, and she never went back. And I think she said that was, well, it was several years ago. She said she enjoyed this job for 8 years, but then it got to where it just wasn't enjoyable. But Cindy, knowing that you had the courage to do what I'm doing right now really gave me the courage to do this. So thank you, Cindy. There's your shout out. And I want to thank you all for your time. I know it took up a lot of it, and I'll give you a parting shot of the homestead here. It's now 6:40, but here's my beautiful view. And guys, I'm going to be getting this beautiful view every day full time once again here very soon. And by the way, I write up here. We love it up here. I wrote my last novel up here. Most of it when it wasn't raining, it wasn't too hot. So if you got anything out of this, please subscribe to Homesteading Off the Grid, our channel. And I want to thank the 6,000 to 8,000 of you a day who's been subscribing. And we'll bring you more next time from Homesteading Off the Grid.